Hi everyone, so today we're going to be creating a edit in the style of Triston Eaton. So looking at Triston Eaton's work, this is kind of what we are going for. So the first thing we need to do is open up an image in Photoshop, a portrait that you're going to be working from. And the first thing you want to do is you want to double click on that padlock to get rid of the locked layer so you can now edit the layers at free will. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that background. So you can use the quick selection tool or you can use the magic wand, whichever is easiest for you. And I'm just going to click and select the background layer and use the minus to get rid of any of those selections that you don't want. And when you're happy, just click delete, and that is the first step. To get rid of those running ants, you can use a keyboard shortcut, which is Ctrl-D, so you can see they've disappeared now. The next thing you want to do is, if we look at Triston Eaton's work, his portraits are all in black and white. So to create that look, we're going to go to Image, Adjustments, Black and White, and just click OK. And I'm just going to go to Image, Adjustments, and Brightness and Contrast to make my portrait a little bit more interesting and to stand out a little bit more. The next thing we want to do is we're going to add another layer. So you can go to the bottom here and you can just click and it'll pick up another layer. You're going to drag that underneath your photo layer, and we need to create a background colour. So you're just going to go to the paint bucket tool, making sure that your colour picker is on white, and just click into that background and we can see that's picked up there. The next thing we need to do is, if we look at Triston Eaton's work, we've got lots of kind of ripped shapes on the portraits, which is what we're going to be creating. So going back to our portrait, we're going to be using the freeform pen tool, which is this tool here. If you can't find it, you might have the pen tool up, so just right click and go to the freeform pen. You want to make sure that it's on shape and not path, and you want to make sure it's got a fill colour. It doesn't matter what fill colour it is, it's just whatever you decide, and no stroke. So I'm just going to start by freehand drawing these ripped shapes onto my portrait. So take your time with it, don't rush. Obviously I'm doing it a little bit quicker for the purpose of the video, but do take your time with this. Think about where you're going to place your rips, where do they fit best on your portrait, is there an area which you would like to focus on, and just think about where you're positioning them. I'm just going to put one more next to this one. And it doesn't matter about going over the edges, and if you make a mistake you can just go to Edit, Undo, and you can just have another go. Okay, once you're happy, what I'm going to do is to separate the shapes that are together. I've gone to the Move tool and I'm just going to click on that area that I've just drawn, going back to the pen tool. I'm just going to change the colour so I can see where it is. So if you've got sections that are together, you can now obviously move that layer underneath the other layer so that it's hidden. Just move that down underneath there. Right. Okay, so that's the first step. The next thing you want to do is you want to start to merge all these layers together. So you're going to start by clicking the top shape, scrolling down to your bottom shape, hold shift and click, and it picks up all those shapes. Right click and rasterize those layers so they become actual shapes. And the next thing we're going to do is go back to our photo layer and we're going to duplicate it. So we've got two. So you're going to right click and duplicate layer. Just click OK. Now what we're going to do is we're going to select all our shapes again, and we're going to merge the layers so they all become one layer, so we can see here. And then the next thing you need to do is you need to go to Layer and Create Clipping Mask. And we can see now those shapes have fit perfectly onto our portrait. So that's the first thing, that's the first step to creating your Triston Eaton portrait. Next thing we need to do to complete our Triston Eaton inspired portrait is we need to merge down those shapes onto the photo layer. So you're going to right click your shapes layer and just click merge down, which will now compile those layers together. You can see there. The next thing we need to do is we need to look at obviously kind of what style Triston Eaton does. So these kind of rich shapes that are all over, they're filled with pictures, imagery, different patterns, maybe some text. So there's lots of different variations of it. So it's kind of up to you where you go with it. Just make sure there's a bit of a link with your image. So you can see there's lots of different types of ways to do it. So I already have saved a couple of images from Google that I wanted to use. I searched like famous food brands. I've used Coca-Cola. I've used different patterns by searching on Google, different patterns, like different designs. And I've just picked a few that I like. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to File, Place Embedded, and I'm just going to pick the first pattern. So I've just gone for a Coca-Cola shaped badge. To change the size of it, you're going to go to Edit, Transform, and Scale. And remember to hold the Shift key down when you are scaling so that it doesn't stretch or distort. And you can go down to the opacity and turn down the opacity so you can see where you're placing it. So you can either, rotate it, stretch it, and make it smaller. So I'm just going to do it so that I think it fits nicely. Once you're happy with it, just click enter, and you're going to right click your image and rasterize that layer so that you are able to edit it. Clicking back on the shapes photo layer, you're going to go to the magic wand tool and you're going to select the area that you want to colour in that pattern. Going back to our image, you're going to go select inverse and just press the delete button. And remember the keyboard shortcut to get rid of those running ants is Control D. And then we can just put our opacity back up to 100%. So that's basically the process that you're going to be following for each section. So again, File, Place Embedded. I'll go for the Union Jack this time. Remember to, if you can't scale it straight away, remember to go to Edit, Transform, and Scale. And make sure you're holding that Shift key down. Turn the opacity down again so you can see where you're placing it, how big you want it. And once you're happy, click enter. Back to that photo layer, selecting magic wand, select that area, back to my image. Remember to right click and rasterize so you can edit it. Select inverse and press delete, Control D to get rid of those running ants and back up to 100. So that's the process that you're going to follow for each step until it's completely filled. Well, until some of your parts are completely filled. I would leave at this part, maybe at least one free so you can add some text in, and I'll show you how to do that. So I'm just going to fast forward a bit now until I've completed all the sections that I want to complete, and then I'll show you how to add in this kind of text area that Triston Eaton does. So now I've finished to add in my shapes and patterns to those rip sections. I'm going to start to look at the typography elements. So going back to Triston Eaton's work, we can see that he does incorporate some kind of typography into his work. So that's what we're going to be looking at. So the first thing you're going to do is go to the type tool, and just click on your screen and enter in a word that you think relates to your portrait. And then what you're going to do is you're going to right click onto your type layer and you're going to go into blending options, and this is where you'll start to alter your word. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go to drop shadow, and this will create a kind of shadow on your word, which helps it stand up and make it look more 3D. You can actually change the direction of your shadow by moving the angle button, so that more that you move that around, you can see that it does actually change whereabouts you want it. If you want to decrease the strength of your shadow, just turn the opacity down. So I'm going to keep it right at the top. The distance is obviously how far away it is, so we're going to keep it nice and close. And the size, that just kind of alters how dense you want your shadow to be. So I'm going to make sure that I'm just going to play around and have a pick of what colours that I like. And then the next thing I'm going to do is go to gradient overlay, and this actually changes the colour of the lettering. So obviously you can see I've already had a go at playing around, but I will show you how to do it. So you're clicking on the colour bar and you'll see this box pops up. So you're going to click on this bottom box here and select a darker tone, because this is the bottom of your word. So you're going to select that darker tone. And then obviously in comparison, the other side, you're going to be selecting a lighter tone, so something that stands out a little bit more. This helps bevel your letter and stand out a little bit more. Once you're happy, just click OK. And that is the first step to creating it. The next thing we're going to do is we need to rasterize the typeface. So right click on your type layer and rasterize type. So now it's able to be edited any way we want. Keyboard shortcut to transform it is Control-T, and make sure that you're holding Shift when you are scaling so that it doesn't stretch or distort as usual. If you would like to stretch it, obviously just let go of the Shift key if you do need to stretch it or anything. It's entirely up to you how you position your lettering. So once you're happy with it, just click OK. And now we need to obviously merge it to the bottom layer. So again, we're going to use the same process, clicking back on the photo layer with the shapes, Magic Wand tool, clicking that section, going back to our type, clicking select, inverse and delete to get rid of the other parts of the letters, and Control-D to deselect the section. And I'm going to go back to our shapes layer and click the Magic Wand tool again so it picks that up. And I'm just going to change the colour of the red. So I'm going to go to Image Adjustments and Hue and Saturation. And I'm just going to change the colour of it so that it matches the yellow tone. So I'm going to go for a purple colour. Obviously you can change the saturation to brighten it. It's up to you however you place it. And once you're happy, just click OK. Control-D to get rid of those running ants. So we can start to see it's coming to life a little bit. So that is the typeface section. The next thing we can do is we can start to add in some details to our pieces. So we need to add in some shadows, make it look a little bit more 3D. So that is the next step. Next thing we need to do is we need to start to add some definition into our ripped areas so that they don't look flat. So I'm just going to go and select one of the areas. So I'll select this yellow area here, and you're going to right click, go into your blending options at the top, and we're going to start off with an inner shadow. So obviously you can see it doesn't look great at the minute. So the first thing you're going to do is turn off use global light, because if you keep that on, when you're adding shadows to each of your sections, it'll change the lighting on all of your sections. So you need to make sure that's clicked off. The opacity is obviously how dense you want the shadows to be. So I don't want it to be too strong because I feel like it can make it look a bit false. And I'm just going to play around with the positioning of where I want it. So I've put it underneath so we can see at the bottom here, it started to lift up slightly, which I think is quite nice. You can also change the colour of your shadow. So it could just be that I want it to be kind of let's go a bit darker than that actually. So we can see it's come up as quite a dark red colour. And then we can go back to our opacity and we can turn it up a little bit. So can you see how that's started to help it pop a little bit now? So that's one way we can do it. Another way we can do it is we can go to inner glow. So again, this can change different types of shadows. If we go and click into the colour box, and if we add an overlay that's similar to our shadow colour and create a bit of a gradient effect, just click OK. So we can see that's added a little bit of a layer on top as well. Obviously changing the opacity changes the density as well. So I'm just going to have a play around with a few of my sections. I'll go to this one here. So I'm right clicking, blending options. Again, I'm going to go into that inner shadow, and I can see it started to appear on this one at the bottom here. So I'm going to change the colour this time to be kind of a nice blue colour to match the colour of my shape. And I'm going to change the area and where I want to place it. So I've changed it now so it's underneath. You can change the distance if you want it to kind of stand out a little bit more. I'm just going to OK that. I'll go to the Union Jack, right click, blending options, going back to that inner glow, inner shadow, and again I'm going to change the colour to this nice red colour, and I'm just going to change where I position it. So we can see they're starting to stand out a little bit now. So that's what I'd like you to do for the next step. So I'm just going to fast forward a little bit here until I've completed all that bit. So you're really playing around with the inner shadows and the colours to help your areas kind of pop out and not look as flat. The next thing we're going to do, once we've added in lots of shadows and details, we can now see they're starting to stand up a little bit. We need to start to create some of Triston Eaton's style. So looking at his work, we can see that he uses lots of kind of dots on his work. So that's what we're going to be trying to imitate. So what I've done is I've picked off just a polka dot image from Google. And I've opened it up in Photoshop on a separate tab. So you're going to go to File and Open to do that. Then you're going to double click the padlock to get rid of it, to unlock the layer. And then the first thing you're going to do is select the magic wand tool, and you're going to be selecting the white area in the back and pressing delete. So we get rid of that white background. Control D to get rid of those running ants. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Image Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, and just bring that lightness right up. The next thing you're going to do is go to Image Adjustments and Colour Balance, and we're going to change it so that it goes a little bit red. I've gone for like a pinky colour. Then we're going to go back to Image Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, and I'm going to turn that saturation up. And then you can obviously change the colour with the hue from there. Once you're happy with that, we can actually click and drag it into our other image. But before we do that, I'm just going to start to create some more of those rich shapes with the pen tool. So again, using that freeform pen tool, it doesn't matter what colour your fill is, and making sure it's on shape. And I'm just going to start to draw just roughly some shapes that are going to be filled in with this kind of polka dotty pattern. Do one more. And that's that. Again, we'll need to select all those layers. So holding the shift key, making sure you've got the top layer selected, select your bottom shape layer, right click, rasterize, and now we can edit them. Going back to the polka dots, I'm literally going to click and drag them onto the layer. Ooh. So now what I can do is I can move them. Control T to be able to scale it and make sure we're using the shift key to scale whatever size we want. I'm just going to have a play around. Once you're happy with the size, you're going to go back to the layer that you want to edit, magic wand tool, going back to our polka dots, right clicking and making sure it's rasterized so I can see that it has been. Select, inverse, delete, and Control D. And now, to get rid of the purple shape underneath, I just need to click the eye icon so that it turns invisible. And we can start to see that that pattern appears. So we're going to repeat that same process, obviously, over and over. So I'm going to go back to polka dots. If you want to change the colour, feel free to do so. So image adjustments, hue and saturation, and you can just kind of have a play around with what colour you want it to be and how intense you want it to be. Click and drag into my image, Control T to scale, and we'll just kind of go back to that shape, and I'm going to use the magic wand tool to select it, back to my polka dots, select inverse, delete, Control D to get rid of those running ants, and going back to that shape, clicking the eye icon so it starts to disappear. So that is the next step that you are going to go through to create your Triston Eaton piece. Okay, so we're coming towards kind of the end of the tutorial. So looking back at Triston Eaton's work, his backgrounds are kind of like, we've got this nice pale green colour. We've also got some blues in the background here. So I'm going to go for this kind of pale blue here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go scroll down to the bottom of my layers and click that base layer that I created originally. Using the colour picker, I'm going to pick a nice pale blue. Okay, and go to that paint bucket tool and bang that in the background. Another thing that Triston Eaton does, if we can see, he's got lots of paint splatters kind of all over his drawings, his paintings, sorry. So that's what we're going to be creating as well. So to do this, I'm just going to go right to the top and I'm going to select a new layer. So at the bottom here, I'm going to use the circle ellipse tool and I'm going to make sure that the fill is on white and it doesn't need a stroke, it can kind of be see-through. And just hold the shift key down to create these kind of circular shapes. They can be wherever you want them to be. It's just to kind of imitate this kind of paint splattery type, I'm so sorry, type of effect. So, okay, so we can see it starting now to come together. And I'll show you one last thing with the Triston Eaton kind of edits. So we can see here he's kind of got these target shapes, so we can incorporate that kind of element. So again, I'm going to go into the circle ellipse tool. This time I'm going to pick a colour. So I'm going to go for a green, I think, for the fill. And the stroke, I'm going to go for purple. We'll go for an orange. Okay. So, and I'm going to make sure that stroke is pretty thick. So now, when I draw my circular shapes, we can see that it's kind of created this disc shape. So using Control T to scale it, I'm just going to bring that down a little bit further. And I'm going to just duplicate that layer so that there'll be two of them. Enter. And Control T to size this one. And I'm going to plonk that into the center of that one. So we can create that kind of bullseye effect. So new layer. Gonna use some different colours this time. And again, bump that up a little bit. Draw that circle again. And duplicate that layer. Enter Command T to resize it. So we're starting to create kind of the Triston Eaton effect. I'll just show you one that I also finished earlier. Obviously I took a little bit more time on this. I spent a bit of a while trying to create the shapes, the rips and different shapes for it. So feel free to have a play around, and I hope you enjoyed the video.